أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته يوم الدين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري احلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My presentation today is to focus on one of the major physicians or even psychologists of the 9th century during the Islamic Renaissance. His name is Abu Zaid Ahmad ibn Sahal al-Balkhi. First of all, we need to put things into context of what happened during that particular Renaissance period. During the Islamic Renaissance period, one of the branches of science in which Muslims most excelled was Islamic medicine. Knowledge of the medical sciences and technique were part of the medical curriculum throughout the world until about a century. The issue of education was at the forefront in the minds of the Muslim since the establishment of the first state, the first Islamic Caliphate in Medina. However, it was the House of Abbasidi that supported scholarship, that supported research development, especially medical research. The important Islamic figure in medicine were Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, known as al-Razi, Abu Ali al-Hussein ibn Sina, known as Ibn Sina, and also Abu Zaid Ahmad ibn Sahal al-Balkhi. They adopted the Hippocratic organic psychiatry, which is biological psychiatry, but they also applied psychosocial therapeutic method. Abu Zaid al-Balkhi was born in a small village called Samistian, which is the province of Balkh, which at the time was in Persia and now is part of Afghanistan. After completing his studies in Baghdad, al-Balkhi returned to Balkh and there he took up the post. Kutub literally means secretary to the prince of the time, which was the ruler Balkh Khan, and he was a psychologist and a scientist, pioneer of psychotherapy, psychophysiology, and psychosomatic medicine. He wrote the medical and psychological work called Masali al-Abdan wal-Anfus, which means the sustenance and soul. Now, al-Balkhi Psychology and Soul, in this book, Balkhi argues that, I quote, since man's construction is from both his soul and his body, therefore human existence cannot be without ishtibah and the body, which means that we cannot separate the body from the soul, the spirit, the body, the mind, and the spirit as well. Connection between the soul body. And that's what is known nowadays as psychosomatic interaction between and the body. Mind and soma mean body. So when we talk about interaction between mind and body or soul and body, we call it psychosomatic interaction. Now, al-Balkhi also stated that if the body gets sick, the nerve, the psyche, or the soul, or the self loses much of the cognitive and comprehensive ability and fail to enjoy, the different aspect of life, or the desirable aspect of life. And if the self or the nerves get sick, the body may also find no joy, no pleasure, in life, and may eventually develop a physical. This was amazing, because this is what we talk about today, that a psychological problem can lead to a physical problem. If I worry a lot of anxiety, for example, I could develop an ulcer, which is physical. I could develop rashes, spots, or whatever it is. So this was a guy, 9th century. He already talked about this, that the relationship between the body and the mind, between the body and the soul, the interaction, the psychosomatic, what is known nowadays as psychosomatic. Now, al-Balkhi used the term Tib al-Ruhani. What he meant by that, he described spiritual and psychological health. And he used the term Tib al-Qalb. As you know, Qalb is a heart, to describe mental medicine. Can you see? So when we talk about mental medicine or psychological medicine, in other words, spiritual disease, we're talking about problems of the heart anyway. And he was the first one to define medical psychology. As he suggested, for example, if you have psychological symptoms of anxiety, anger, and sadness, and they are common among people, most of which are learned behavior and a reaction to emotional stress. What he is saying there is that it's common among people. We all suffer a little anxiety, depression, and so forth. That's common. But a lot of them, it's learned behavior. What Martin Seligman talked about, learned helplessness. He was talking about a form of conditioning, classical conditioning during that time. It was later on in the 19th century that Pavlov developed classical conditioning. Very, very well idolized. Now, al-Balkhi believed in the interaction of the body and mind, and the interaction between the physical and psychological disorders, which resulted in psychosomatic disorders. He systematically distinguished between psychosis, which is a very serious form of mental disorders, and neurosis. He categorized neurosis in 4 emotional disorders: anxiety, fear, aggression, and anger, depression and sadness, and obsession. And he categorized depression into sadness, but also normal depression, what is known today as reactive depression. So, in other words, he was already categorizing 2 types of depression. One, which is known nowadays as reactive depression, or endogenous depression, which there is no external factors, but it's possible that it is to do with all matters. He described, classified, and distinguished other disorders. For example, obsessive compulsive disorder known as OCD, and from other mental illness. Now, if you look at this particular slide, we're going to find right and left two different criteria for obsessive compulsive disorder. The one on the left is called DSM psychiatry. It's like a diagnostic tool. It's a manual. It's called Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Society. We call it DSM-5. If you study that, you can see that Al-Balkhi descriptive criteria of the 9th century is similar with the in harmony, in fact, with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual on OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. What does the content of the slide tell us? On reflection, we can see that there is stark commonality between the two texts in describing the afflicted individual attempt to suppress the unwanted obsession. The DSM-5 mentioning the attempt to ignore or suppress such thought, urges, or images. Let me explain very briefly OCD. Obsession compulsive disorder. You have an obsession. The obsession is to do with the thought, which means there are a lot of things running in your head. But the obsession is accompanied by ritual, and we call it compulsion. So in OCD, there's an obsession and a compulsion. Now, there's a stark commonalities between the two texts in describing the afflicted individual attempt to suppress the unwanted obsession, which to do with the thought. The DSM-5 mention that the individual make an attempt to either ignore or suppress those thoughts or urges or images. Al-Balkhi text talks of the individual not being able to use their mental faculties to deal with anything else, and would be too busy with the imagined imminent danger to enjoy the pleasure or to concentrate on what is said to him or her, or to socialize with others. Whenever the person tries to let go these thoughts and socialize the disturbing thought, we shoot up to control his mind. So, same thing, same criteria, same commonalities between somebody in the 9th century and what was developed in the 21st century. Alhamdulillah. When we dissect a bit about the OCD from Al-Balkhi perspective, you observe that those obsessive whispers, sometimes they are shaitan, wash wash, we call it wash wash. These obsessive whispers are among the most intrusive psychological symptoms that tend to stay with us, that tend to linger deep within the core of human being. Thus triggering those echoing thoughts that tend to basically cage the person within themselves. Further than that, In terms of intervention strategies, he is known as the father of modern cognitive behavior therapy. Not Albert Ellis, not John Wolfe, according to the Western narrative. No, the 9th century cognitive behavior therapist is Zaid al-Balkhi. He developed the technique of what is known as reciprocal inhibition with respect to the imbalance. It was later on that Joseph Wolfe, in the late 1960s, introduced the idea of reciprocal inhibition. Al-Balkhi demonstrated in detail the importance of using rational and spiritual therapies to cure or manage specific disorders. For example, for the treatment of phobia, fear. For phobia, Al-Balkhi suggests a technique which is called Ridayat al-Nafs. Ridayat al-Nafs means psychic training. This is known nowadays in behavior therapy language as systematic desensitization or exposure therapy. That's the treatment we use, and it's a very effective treatment. He developed systematic desensitization, a form of systematic desensitization. Not only in terms of intervention, but also he was promoted preventative approach or a public health approach, which encouraged individuals to keep what he called cognition sets, thinking sets, cognitive mean thoughts, so that you can use them during the times of trial and tribulation. It's like having some sort of strategy in your head, before the stress come along. If you anticipate stress, then you could use those. You can use dhikr, you can sit down, you can do all sorts of things. In the sustenance of the physical health of man, which he discussed in 14 chapters, the approach he used was purely preventative. That means to preserve health and protect the body from physical disorders. With tremendous foresight, he includes 2 chapters on environmental and public health. The first on the importance of having, for example, a suitable house, pure water, clean air. And the second on protecting the body by avoiding the extreme of hot and cold or hot and cold temperatures, and by wearing appropriate attire or clothing. Other chapters include the importance of nutrition, that is proper nourishment, with suitable food and drink, good sleep, and cleanliness of the body. He also recognized the importance of physical exercise and massage as well, because he compared the body fluid to nature stagnant and running water, noting that as stagnant water quickly become polluted and of course unhygienic, while running water preserve its purity. Likewise, lack of physical exercise can cause body humors to become stagnant and even pathological. Finally, in the 9th chapter of the treatise, Al-Balkhi introduced an extremely delicate subject, one remarkably ahead of the time, which today would be the domain of modern sex therapies. And this is the study of various sexual attributes and their effects. Al-Balkhi considers sexual abstinence to be unnatural and a cause for certain physical problems. He even suggests method for the treatment of sexual impotence, including certain nutrition, drinks, and notes the harmful effect on the body of medication that at the time purported to improve sexuality. In conclusion, he's a creative genius. His insight on human psychopathology, as well as his diagnosis of psychological elements, which include stress, depression, fear, anxiety, phobia, obsessive-compulsive disorders, together with the treatment by cognitive behavior therapy, relate to us in every way and in synchronization with modern psychiatry and modern psychology. But what's important also, it incorporates a greater dimension to include the soul and, most importantly, the worship of Allah the Almighty. Al-Balkhi explained symptoms and treatment, giving advice, provide preventative measures, how to return the body and the soul to their natural healthy state. In doing so, he displays a keen understanding of the human condition and the medical nature of human emotional state. He promoted preventative approach and encouraged individuals to keep positive cognitive sets to use in times of stress, in times of trauma, in times of trial and tribulation. He seeks the preservation of health in the human by giving simultaneous and comprehensive attention to both the body and soul together with the disease to which they are subjected. As he put himself, quote, the right approach is to supplement ministration to the body with those directed to the soul. This is essential, unquote. The benefit is intensified by reason of the interrelation between the two. Man constitution is from both his soul and body. This is the end of this presentation. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum